She thought her father died without ever saying sorry, until she found something hidden in a kitchen drawer. The house felt smaller than she remembered. When Liyana pushed open the front door, a soft breath of dust and old wood greeted her like a quiet memory that had been waiting. The hinges made the same tired sound they had made her entire childhood. Nothing had changed, and somehow, everything had. She stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind her. The living room stood frozen in time. The same brown sofa, the same clock ticking too loudly on the wall, the same faded rug her father refused to replace, because it was still good. The afternoon sun slipped through the thin curtains, drawing pale lines across the floor. She placed her bag down near the doorway and stood still for a long moment. This was the house she once couldn't wait to leave. And now it was the house she had returned to alone. Her father had passed away 2 weeks earlier. A quiet heart condition no one knew had grown serious. The call came early in the morning while she was at work in the city. By the time she arrived, everything had already ended. Their last conversation had been short, polite, careful, not healed. Liyana walked toward the kitchen without meaning to. Her feet remembered the way better than her heart did. The tiles were cool under her shoes. The familiar scent of dried spices and old cooking oil lingered in the air, faint but present. The kitchen window was open just slightly, letting in warm afternoon light. The lace curtains moved gently in the breeze. The wooden cabinets were scratched and slightly faded. The stove still had a small dent on its side from years ago when she had accidentally dropped a metal pot. Her father had laughed that day. "You cook with too much excitement," he had said. She swallowed. For years, this kitchen had been the center of their home. He wasn't a man of many words, but he spoke through food. When business at his small grocery shop was good, he cooked something special. When she passed an exam, he made her favorite lentil stew. When she was sad, he sliced fruit neatly and left it by her door without knocking. But when she told him she wanted to leave town and study design instead of taking over the shop, something shifted. He didn't yell. He didn't forbid her. He simply went quiet. That quiet lasted years. Liyana opened one of the cabinets. Inside were neatly stacked plates. She ran her fingers along the edges. No dust. He had always kept things clean. A small ache pressed into her chest. She had told herself he was disappointed in her, that he thought her career was unstable, impractical, foolish. Their arguments were never explosive, just sharp and short. Words that ended too quickly, conversations that avoided the real subject. The last time she visited before moving fully to the city, they stood right here in this kitchen. "You don't understand," she had said. "I understand more than you think," he replied. But he never explained what he meant. She moved to the counter and opened the top drawer. Inside were spoons, rubber bands, old receipts, a small flashlight that probably no longer worked. Everything arranged with his quiet sense of order. She began sorting through things slowly. Part of her came to clean the house, to prepare it for selling. Another part of her wasn't ready to let go. Each object carried a small memory. A chipped mug he refused to throw away. A dull knife he sharpened every Sunday. A folded grocery list in his neat handwriting. She closed the drawer and opened the one beneath it. This one stuck slightly before sliding open. It held old papers, warranty cards for appliances, and loose recipe clippings from magazines. Her father rarely used printed recipes. Most of his dishes lived only in his head. Liyana gently shuffled through the papers. Then she saw it. A small, thick recipe card, slightly yellowed at the edges. The corners were bent, as if it had been held many times. Her father's handwriting covered the front, steady, slightly slanted letters written in blue ink. Her breath caught. It was the spiced tomato rice he used to make on special evenings. The dish she requested every birthday as a child. The one that filled the entire house with warmth and rich aroma. She hadn't tasted it in years. She picked up the card carefully. The paper felt soft from age. A faint stain marked one side. Probably oil or sauce from long ago. The ingredients were listed in careful detail. Measurements precise. Small notes in the margins like, add garlic slowly and let it rest 5 minutes before serving. Her throat tightened. He had written this down. Why? She turned the card over slowly. On the back, in darker ink, fresher ink, there was writing. Not a recipe. A sentence Her fingers trembled slightly as she read the first few words. If she ever finds this, the ink looked newer than the rest. Not recent enough to be from yesterday, but not decades old either. Maybe months, maybe after their last visit. Her heart began to beat louder in her ears. She leaned back against the counter, gripping the edge to steady herself. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. If she ever finds this, he had written something for her. Something he never said aloud. Her eyes moved further down, but the rest of the sentence curved toward the bottom of the card, partially hidden by a faint crease in the paper. She would have to unfold it gently to see the rest. For a moment, she couldn't. All the years of distance sat between her and that ink. All the phone calls cut short. All the visits that ended too soon. Alte pride hers and his. What if it wasn't he? What she hoped. What if it was simply another quiet instruction? Another careful piece of advice disguised as something else. She looked around the kitchen. The sunlight had shifted slightly, casting longer shadows across the floor. Dust floated gently in the air. Outside, a distant car passed down the quiet street. This room had held so many ordinary days, and now it held something she wasn't sure she was ready to read. Liyana traced her father's handwriting with her thumb, these steady lines. The familiar shape of each letter. He had always struggled to say emotional things directly. When her mother passed years ago, he never spoke about his grief. He simply cooked more often, cleaned more carefully, stayed busier than necessary. Maybe this card was the same. Maybe this was his way. Her chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't only sadness. It was something softer, something uncertain. She slowly began to unfold the bottom edge of the recipe card, her breath shallow, her hands careful. The paper made a faint crackling sound. She paused once more, standing alone in the kitchen where she had grown up, holding a small piece of paper that might hold the words she had waited years to hear. Liyana realized that sometimes the hardest thing isn't leaving home. It's coming back, and she wasn't too sure if she was ready for what the rest of the sentence might finally say. She stood in the quiet kitchen, the recipe card trembling slightly between her fingers. The paper had already begun to unfold at the corner. She could still stop. She could slide it back into the drawer, close it, and leave this house with her questions untouched. But she didn't. Slowly, carefully, she flattened the crease with her palm and turned the card fully over. The rest of the sentence came into view. If she ever finds this, I hope she knows I was always proud of her for choosing her own path. I just did not know how to say it without feeling like I was losing her. The words were small, squeezed tightly to fit the space. Below it, written in slightly shakier lines, I am sorry if my silence felt like disappointment. It was only fear. A father is not always brave. Liyana felt something inside her loosen and break at the same time. For years she had carried a quiet weight, the belief that she had let him down, that every success in the city came with an invisible cost, that her independence had created a distance too wide to close. She had mistaken his silence for judgment. But now, standing in the kitchen where he had measured spices with patient hands, she saw it differently. He had not been disappointed. He had been afraid. Afraid of losing her to a world he did not understand. Afraid that if he encouraged her too easily, she would never come back. Afraid that love, once stretched too far, might snap. Her knees felt weak. She pulled out one of the wooden chairs and sat down slowly. The late afternoon light rested softly across the table, touching the recipe card like a quiet witness. She read the message again, and again. The simple honesty of it hurt more than anger ever could. It was so much like him. Awkward, direct, and a little late. A father is not always brave. A small, broken laugh escaped her lips. For so long, she had seen him as unmovable, strong, certain. The kind of man who never doubted his choices. But he had doubted himself too. She placed the card flat on the table and closed her eyes. Memories rose gently, not sharp this time, softer. She remembered being 10 years old, standing on a stool beside him while he cooked this very dish. He let her stir the pot even when she splashed sauce on the stove. He pretended not to notice when she added too much salt. I always sighed, we can fix it. She remembered her last birthday at home before leaving for the city. He had made the tomato rice, without asking what she wanted. The two of them ate quietly. She had taken it as another sign he didn't approve. Now she wondered if it had been his way of saying goodbye without saying goodbye. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Liyana wiped her cheeks and stood up. Without fully deciding to, she moved toward the counter and placed the recipe card upright against a small jar. Her eyes scanned the kitchen. Rice, tomatoes, onions, garlic. The familiar ingredients were all there in the pantry, neatly stored in labeled containers. He had restocked before he passed, as if expecting another ordinary week. She washed her hands at the sink and tied her hair back, just as she used to. The kitchen felt different now, less heavy, more alive. She measured the rice carefully, following his handwriting step by step. When she chopped the onions, the sharp scent filled the air, bringing tears to her eyes that were no longer only from grief. Oil warmed in the old pan, making a gentle, comforting sound. As the garlic touched the heat, the smell rose instantly, rich and familiar. For the first time since the funeral, her breathing felt steady. Cooking had always been his language. Maybe now it could be hers too. She followed every instruction exactly as he had written, even the small notes in the margins. Add garlic slowly. She smiled through her tears and did just that. When the tomatoes softened into a thick sauce, she stirred carefully, remembering how he would tap the spoon twice against the pot before covering it. She did the same. As the dish simmered, the house slowly filled with warmth. The scent drifted through the hallway, into the living room, touching corners that had felt cold when she arrived. She leaned against the counter and let the memories come without resisting them. She saw him standing where she stood now, shoulders slightly hunched, focused on the stove. She saw the quiet pride he never voiced when neighbors complimented her school projects displayed on the fridge. She remembered how he stayed up late the night before she moved away, pretending to organize receipts at the table while she packed. He had not known how to speak the words, but he had written them down. And he had hidden them in the one place he knew she would eventually return to the kitchen. A soft knock on the front door startled her. She turned off the stove and wiped her hands quickly. When she opened the door, she found their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Iqbal, holding a small bowl. "I saw your lights on," the woman said gently. "I thought you might be here." Liyana nodded and invited her inside. As soon as Mrs. Iqbal stepped into the house, she paused and smiled faintly. "That smell?" she said. "He used to make this when he was in a good mood." Liyana felt her chest tighten again, but this time it was not painful. "I found his recipe," she replied softly. They sat together at the small kitchen table, 2 bowls of tomato rice between them. The food tasted almost exactly as she remembered. Warm, balanced, comforting. Maybe slightly less perfect than his, but close enough. Mrs. Iqbal took a bite and nodded. "He would be happy you made this." Liyana looked down at the recipe card resting beside her plate. "He wrote something for me," she said quietly. The neighbor reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Sometimes parents love so deeply that they don't know how to say it properly." Liyana nodded. For years she had waited for a dramatic apology, a long conversation, a clear moment of reconciliation. Instead, she received a small card hidden in a drawer, and somehow it was enough. After Mrs. Iqbal left, Liyana cleaned the kitchen slowly. She washed the dishes carefully, dried the counter, and folded the lace curtain back into place. The house no longer felt like a space filled with unfinished arguments. It felt like a place that had held love in quiet forms. She picked up the recipe card one more time and read the message again. Then she placed it carefully inside her bag, between the pages of her notebook, safe and close. She walked through the house before turning off the lights. The living room no longer felt frozen. The hallway no longer felt distant. At the front door, she paused and looked back toward the kitchen. "I understand now," she whispered into the still air. "Not everything broken needs a loud repair. Some apologies are written softly. Some pride is hidden behind silence. Some love waits patiently in ordinary places, in drawers, in recipes, in habits repeated for years." As she stepped outside and closed the door behind her, the evening sky stretched wide above the quiet street. She no longer carried the weight of unfinished words. She carried something lighter. Forgiveness.